Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Well, good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood, who's standing in for Patrick. And we're here all the way till midday with all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you care about.
So make sure you get in touch with us with your views as usual on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading those out throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 10 o'clock. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Those pupils are also being told they're going to have to take and wear face masks that will be mandatory in lessons for at least the next 3 weeks. Classes may also be merged if too many teachers are off sick. The new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of Omicron. Nadeem Zahawi says schools must do everything they can to protect face-to-face learning.
I want to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicenter, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing masks.
Well, meanwhile, the Education Secretary also says there's nothing in the data that justifies extending COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory on public transport and employees are encouraged to work from home. Well, on Wednesday of this week, the government is reviewing the current Plan B COVID regulations. Now, a legal document Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex case against him is going to be unsealed and made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between Virginia Giuffre and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Mrs Giuffre alleges that Andrew sexually assaulted her when she was 17. The Prince denies any wrongdoing. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition calling for Tony Blair to be stripped of his knighthood. The former Prime Minister was included in the New Year's honours list, but critics say the 2003 invasion of Iraq makes him unsuitable for the Queen's highest honour. More than 360,000 people have signed the petition. Ministers are being urged to bring in a new law that would guarantee all workers 2 weeks of paid leave after a bereavement. The SNP's Patricia Gibson is bringing forward a private member's bill to Westminster, which she says would allow people to grieve without worrying about financial pressures. 2 people are missing after wildfires in the US. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying 1,000 homes and buildings. Police don't know yet what caused the blaze. Investigators say they haven't ruled out arson.
The origin of the fire hasn't been confirmed. It's suspected to be power lines, but we are investigating that today. And we have folks on the ground as we speak trying to pinpoint that cause.
Now, as many of us took up DIY, brought new pets, learned an outdoor hobby in lockdown, thousands of us also gave ourselves injuries in the process. According to new NHS figures, it led to hospital admissions for over 8,000 tool accidents and more than 7,000 dog bites and over 5,000 people falling off playground equipment. You are right up to date. I'll have the headlines for you in half an hour. Right now, to the point.
Well, good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, coming to you with very large sleeves this morning, and Tom Harwood, who is standing in for Patrick today. And we'll be here with you until midday, bringing you the updates you need on today's big story. So here's what's coming up.
Concerns about the Omicron variant continue to affect our daily lives, with hospitality venues in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland still having to navigate rules to curb the spread. On top of all of that, some hospitals are now banning visitors amid a rise in admissions. We'll be live on the ground all morning to bring you the latest.
Yes, and mandatory masks in English schools, secondary schools in particular, as the new term starts, is a measure that's proving quite divisive. Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has said, however, that face coverings will be required until 26th of January. And he spoke to GB News this morning. We'll show you what he had to say about it all.
Also on the show, the rise in the cost of energy is a huge concern for people up and down the country. Already, we've seen 30 energy firms collapsing since August and bills soaring. A group of 20 MPs have voiced their concerns in an open letter. We'll be talking about what they're calling for and what the plans the government might have to support them.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch as usual. We want to hear your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
But first, Mercy is going to give you her views on the great outdoors, supposedly being too white.
Nature broadcaster and adventurer Ben Fogle has called the great outdoors a white middle-class theme park in an article published over the weekend, a claim that has been made by many others several times before. Last year, for instance, the BBC published an article titled "Rural Racism in Dorset. Why is our countryside 98% white?" Someone writing in The Guardian had this to say: "To be black in the British countryside means being an outsider." And Countryfile presenter Ellie Harrison made the claim that rural Britain is racist and that national parks are a, quote, white environment. Now, I agree with Ben Fogle when he says that spending time in the countryside is alien to too many people and that we should get more kids out in the great outdoors. And in a way, he's right. The figures do show that only 1% of visitors to England's national parks are from an ethnic minority, and that's compared to around 14% of the nation as a whole. But, and I don't mean to be crude, so what? I find the idea that there's something racist about the fact that ethnic minorities tend not to live in or visit rural areas idiotic at best. Immigrants and ethnic minorities are concentrated in urban areas, mainly because of the economic and cultural opportunities cities offer. They're not excluded en masse by those who live in the countryside. And quite frankly, this idea that the countryside or national parks are inaccessible for people who happen to have brown skin is utter tosh. National parks are free to visit, free. It costs zilch to enjoy a national park. It's also free to visit the hundreds of country parks littered across the UK. I love the countryside. I've lived there and spent lots of my free time there. I personally have never seen or experienced anything untoward when it comes to my being in the countryside as a black woman. As far as I'm concerned, these so-called racist barriers to accessing the countryside are much ado about nothing. Yes, it's Ben Fogle, of course, saying, in a way, he's right. The countryside. I don't like this notion that it's too white. I mean, at all. But
that implies there should be a requisite amount of whiteness somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it completely ignores the fact that, you know, I said there that the BBC published an article querying why on earth is our countryside 98%. Well, that's because of demography and how populations move, and the fact that immigrants and ethnic minorities tend to be concentrated around where there's work in urban areas, etc. I think
you might as well ask, why is Scotland so white? Why is Wales so white?
So and I just don't think it's inaccessible at all. You know, it is free. I mean, you don't get much free these days, but you can actually go to a national. Yes, there's the cost of getting there and all that kind of thing, but it's free to enjoy. The countryside is free to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. No one should feel held back.
Yes.
Well, now as we enter 2022, many of you may have been hoping that COVID would become a relic of 2021. Despite data suggesting there's no need for further restrictions, some new measures are being introduced.
Yes, secondary school pupils in England will be wearing masks in the classroom this week and will need to be tested for COVID before returning from the festive season. But just yesterday, Minister said there was nothing in the current COVID data to suggest more curbs like these were needed in England.
Of course, in Scotland and Wales, measures including restrictions on hospitality have been in place since before the new year.
Yes. Well, GB News' national reporter Paul Hawkins joins us from Westminster. Paul, what more can you tell us?
Well, just to give you the latest figures for England, because that is what the government says is the data that they say that is leading their decisions. 123,547 COVID cases in England. That's down 24% on the day before. Those are the latest figures for England, although they do follow a 5-day rise in the numbers of those infected. NHS bosses say 12,000 people are currently in hospital, although the number of those in intensive care, those numbers remain stable. So infection rates at the moment in England, in the last 24 hours, they've fallen, although they do follow a 5-day rise, and the numbers of those needing intensive care are stable. The reason why the government's introduced this face mask mandation in schools, though, is because it's worried about teachers testing positive and then having to self-isolate for 7 days. That self-isolation period, by the way, at the moment, there is some pressure for the government to reduce it to 5 days, as they have done in the US, but the UK Health Security Agency is saying that the self-isolation period should remain at 7 days for now. So in the meantime, pupils are being asked to wear face masks. Is that necessary or not? I have to say, if I give you the opinions here of two scientists, both of which advise SAGE, that's the independent group of scientists that advise the government, Dr. Helen Salisbury says that they should be wearing face masks in school. She advises SAGE, but Professor Russell Ulner, he says that it should be kept under review, and there are worries as well about children's mental health, about their emotional well-being, wearing masks for so long during the day in schools in England. Although it has to be said that that hasn't happened since May, and as we've said, in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, kids there are wearing face masks in school there. So there's a little bit of dispute about how much of a difference wearing face masks makes. Nadeem Zahawi has said that there is a study of 123 schools. He will share the data within the next 48 hours as to what that says. But he says that wearing face masks has made a difference, and that's why they're imposing these measures, because they're worried that if teachers test positive, that they have to self-isolate, then kids won't be able to learn in schools. Indeed, the advice that he's been giving schools, as well as wearing face masks, is also for schools, for classes to merge if teachers do test positive. So, you know, that's the advice to schools. They're also telling pupils to get tested when they arrive for the first day of the new term tomorrow, and then from then on every week or so to test 2 times a week using lateral flow tests, which at the moment I've managed to order one through the government website this morning. What it tends to be is that you can order those lateral flow tests through the post via the government website, and then they seem to run out and you have to keep refreshing it. In terms of getting a PCR test, there are slots available at the moment according to the government website, although it's difficult to get one in the northeast of England. So there is some issues logistically with getting tests, but along with face masks and also merging classes, the government is hoping to keep pupils in classrooms instead of having to learn remotely.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for that comprehensive overview. It is a complicated situation for parents across the country, and hopefully that has helped clear some things up.
Yes, while Conservative Member of Parliament for Holton Price and Howden, that's how you say that right, Tom's the expert here, and former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, of course, David Davis, joins us now. Thank you for joining us, David. You've been very critical previously of certain COVID measures, vaccine passports in particular. You said they give people a false sense of security, and we've just heard there from Paul. There is conflicting scientific evidence, isn't there, around how useful masks are. Some people say masks give people a false sense of security. What do you make on the government's call to make masks mandatory in schools at the moment?
Well, actually, unusually, I think they're probably about right where they are. I mean, let's sort of pick it apart a bit. I mean, first thing you've got to understand is the data we have is very incomplete. I mean, for example, if you look at as you heard from your reporter, what's happened to the incidence of COVID in the last day or so, it's gone down, and it's gone down quite sharply. Now, if that is a replication of what happened in South Africa, where it peaked and is now declining without any intervention effect, then that means we can relax a bit. If, however, it's just the outcome of people being at home for Christmas and then when they get back to work, it'll grow again, we won't know, and we can't know that for a couple of weeks. The second thing is that people keep talking, and the mainstream media and the government all repeat this sin as though apples and oranges were the same. The Omicron virus is massively less harmful than the Delta virus, and it's displacing it. One scientist actually described it as nature's vaccine. So we perhaps should be a little bit less nervous of it. Now, what's going on with the pupils in schools, I think, is the government is trying to avoid the problem it's already seeing in the health service, which is the staff effectively isolating at home, and that crippling the provision of the public service. And people are very worried, and I think Nadeem Zahawi is quite rightly worried about not harming the education of yet another generation of children. So my view, I'm really rather with Professor Russell, you cited earlier, who said, OK, let's go with this, but let's be very clear to keep an eye on it and stop requiring masks the moment the evidence indicates we can relax on it, the moment. Because you're quite right, it's uncertain as to whether masks help. They probably help a bit, but they certainly are not a solution to the problem.
I think there's relatively strong evidence that they do help decrease the spread, but not by a huge amount. I wonder, we've heard all of these phrases before, 3 weeks to flatten the curve. We were told that the lockdown last year would only be a month or two, and it's stretched in one form or another through to the summer. What confidence do we have in these mask measures in schools, making sure that they are sunsetted, making sure that they don't just go on and are extended, as with so many previous coronavirus restrictions before them?
Yeah, well, you're right in the first part of your comments. I mean, many of the measures were taken in the early part of COVID were probably entirely ineffective. Many of the lockdown measures almost certainly came after the peaks anyway. And masks, well, there's various data. There's very little observational data. There were some experiments done which showed that masks sort of cut transmission by 75%. If I'm the person carrying the disease and I wear a mask, I protect you. It doesn't protect you wearing a mask, doesn't protect you from me, as it were, or not so much. So will they back down? Will they reverse the policy? Actually, this time I think they will. You're dead right again. The cabinet has been for a year and a half altogether too supine in the face of data which was often wrong, theories which were often wrong, assessments by scientists which were essentially very safety first. They gave worst case scenarios and didn't point it out and let people think that they were forecasts. All of that has, I think, made the cabinet, for the first time in 18 months, actually stand up to it a bit and say, no, we want to see the data properly. We want to understand it properly. We don't, if it's not necessary to do something, then it's necessary not to do it, and that's true of masks. And so we saw that just before Christmas, the cabinet standing up to the advocates of security first, if you like. And I think this time around, everybody's going to be looking very, very carefully at the data and seeing what happens. And if I'm right and the trend continues down, then I should think by the middle of January there'll be calls for the termination of this policy.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed on that. I'm afraid we're running up to an advert break, so David Davis, we're going to have to leave it there. But really interesting thoughts, as always. Thank you very much for joining us here on To The Point.
Yes, well, after the break, we'll be discussing how more than a dozen hospitals plan to ban visits in the wake of rising Omicron infections. But first, Tom will give you the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Now, looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking showery for many, with colder air working its way southwards over northern areas. Let's take a look at the details. Many of the showers should have eased from southwest England, but in general, a cloudy and breezy picture with rain not too far off the south coast. A similar story for London and the southeast, with a fair amount of dry, if rather cloudy weather around Monday lunchtime. Still on the mild side, though. Scattered showers will be affecting much of Wales, with brightest weather further north and cloudier skies in the south. Temperatures up to 11 degrees Celsius. Bright skies for much of the Midlands, though. A few showers likely towards Herefordshire and Shropshire. Temperatures at lunchtime up to 9 or 10 degrees Celsius for many areas with brisk southwesterly wind. Some sunshine for much of Yorkshire, but will run into thicker cloud towards County Durham and Northumberland, with some patchy rain arriving on the scene by lunchtime. Temperatures by now back into single figures. The weather front bringing about the change to colder weather will be sat over southern Scotland at lunchtime, with temperatures continuing to fall through the afternoon. That same weather front will be making inroads into the north of Northern Ireland, but at this stage it should still be dry and perhaps quite bright for Belfast and Armagh. Rain and hill snow coming south into northern England this evening and becoming very windy, with snow showers in northern Scotland. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Now, some hospitals are banning people from visiting patients because of the rising number of COVID cases in the northeast of England. A third hospital has announced it's suspending visits.
Our reporter Rachel Sweeney is live for us at the University Hospital of North Tees in Stockton. Rachel, which hospitals aren't allowing visitors, and how have people in your area taken this news?
Yes, the University Hospital of North Tees behind me in Stockton is the third North East hospital to cancel visiting. At the weekend, Sunderland Royal and South Tyneside District Hospitals both also banned visitors temporarily because of rising numbers of COVID cases. The North Tees and Hartlepool Foundation Trust said it was a difficult decision to make, but one that they felt that they had to. Now, some visitors will be allowed in, but circumstances have to be exceptional, and families are asked to contact wards directly to plead their case, as it were. Now, so many viewers have been in touch with their opinions on this. Chris Clark said, "I'm due to be a dad. I hope it doesn't affect births." Chris Johnson said it's a necessary evil because of the risk of infection. Owen Weir, cancer treatment was bad enough without having to do it alone. Rupert Myers said we should trust our medical professionals. Miss Sterland, she'll never get over losing her dad and not being able to see him. Ken Clasper said it's very difficult for those with dementia. Well, Chris Hobson, who is the Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which represents health trusts, he posted a 25-tweet thread, and in it he said the NHS is under extreme and arguably worse pressure than it was in January 2021. It said that the rapid increase in community infections is a problem. That's the issue here in Stockton. He said the NHS is working flat out. The next couple of days is crucial, and they'll continue to monitor the situation.
Interesting situation there. I wonder, is this really interrupting people, especially at this time of year when potentially people really want to see family members? In your part of the world, have people really run against this? Have people maybe tried to push back against it?
Well, as you've heard from the viewer comments there, it really is a mixed bag. A lady messaged me last night and said she has a phone and an iPad in hospitals. She's not bothered if people can't come in because she's got the technology. But, you know, not everyone knows how to use that. It's very difficult. I think that the main talking point about this is the situation around baby scans and births and can you go into labour? What are the rules? Well, I'm glad to say that in the northeast of England, fathers and partners can attend scans. They can't go into consultation appointments, but you know, a lot of women attend them on their own anyway because partners work full time. Someone's got to be making some money while you go through that. So it's not a huge disruption, but I know that in Birmingham, partners have been banned from scans, and there's a huge pushback there.
Thank you, Rachel, for bringing us that. It's definitely quite distressing for a lot of families, I would assume, especially, of course, women who might be attending appointments or might be in hospital with pregnancy-related reasons. That's a real key time, I suppose, when you need your partner there or somebody there to be with you.
Tricky. Well, those in England managed to enjoy the festive period relatively restriction-free, of course. Some people partied cautiously while others spent the Christmas period in isolation. Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis went out to Grantham to see how people there celebrated Christmas and New Year's this year.
Christmas Day on our own, me and my husband at our house. We didn't see our family, and that was in order to then be able to celebrate for New Year's Eve. So we had quite a quiet Christmas this year. We didn't go to any bars or pubs, and then New Year's Eve we went to a big party and did tests before we went.
We went out New Year's Eve afternoon, so I was at a local restaurant, the wife and I, because she works retail, so she was working the following day. So we were eating and drinking in the afternoon. The kids, who are both grown up now, were out in the pubs in the evening.
We would usually probably go to the pub for a few drinks, but we didn't this year because obviously COVID is still around, this new variant, and we just wanted to keep our family as safe as possible.
We went out for meals and we also had Christmas with the family. We didn't really alter any plans, and the reason for that was because we're all vaccinated. As requested by the government, and we just took precautions as and when needed.
Because of mine and my husband's age, we feel a lot more vulnerable, so we prefer not to go to places. We could have gone to somewhere on New Year's Eve, which is very close to us, but we chose not to.
Normally I would go out and about and possibly go to a football match and things like that, but not now, no.
I spent it with my daughter. Only one son came with me, so there's only 3 of us, and we didn't go out socialising, and although I've been boosted, I feel a bit safer having that.
We felt really confident about New Year's. Obviously we had loads of family and friends around, and we really enjoyed doing what we were doing. Like, there was karaoke involved, everyone was just having fun, and although there was like old people like my girlfriend's nana there involved, like we weren't afraid of Omicron at all. Like, it was just us being together, like in unity, you know, in harmony and peace. So there was nothing to be afraid of, mate, honestly.
This is the new future.
just get on with it. Wear your mask when you go into a restaurant, sit down, then take it off and have your meal or drink or whatever, and use a bit of common sense. Life has got to get on. We've got to get on with it.
Well, I found that that young man there talking about what did he say? Unity. We enjoyed our Christmas in unity.
Yeah,
I thought that was quite a
lovely.
very profound way to describe that. Let's go to some of your views. Lots of views coming in, particularly about the issue about whether the countryside is too white, or if it's Ben Fogle, the broadcaster, has called it a white middle-class playground or white middle-class theme park. A lot of you are getting in touch about the views I gave on this earlier, and Anne-Marie has said she lives in Sussex and they have a large number of countryside orienteering groups, and she says that a lot of young ethnic minorities do come and visit. Robert says, my wife's Indian and she's always made to feel welcome in the countryside, which is where we live and spend most of our time. It is true that there are relatively few people of colour in the countryside, but in my experience, they're always made to feel welcome. And I think Jacob as well makes a good point, which is that he suggests the low black turnout to national parks reflects wider injustices, such as not having the time to visit because of low paid work, for example. So there are those socio-economic factors that would, but then they're not to do with race, are they? They were to do with class.
But also, I wonder, to what extent does someone saying, oh, the countryside is so white, it's just for white people, blah, 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 does that actually perpetuate a situation?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereby it's more likely to turn away ethnic minorities
Yeah,
from the
absolutely.
countryside?
I think
perhaps it would be better for Ben Fogle to say the countryside is very welcoming towards black people. And then
I think the countryside is welcoming, and a lot of our viewers are saying that. And it is that thing, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell somebody, you know, this place is not very welcoming to you, you're not going to go there, are you?
Yeah.
So there is a bit of that. And there's been lots of emails about a situation with your tie or lack thereof.
That's right. For those of you who are watching the briefing just after 9:30 this morning, the Tory MP Lee Anderson finished up his interview with, or my interview with him, by saying that I should wear a tie. Now, I asked people to get in touch to GB Views at gbnews.uk about this, and I have to say that it's been a bit of a mixed picture. Lisa has written in to say, Lee Anderson was reading our thoughts. You're a handsome young man and would look smarter wearing a tie when presenting. Whereas
I wonder why you chose that email.
Well, Barry has the opposite opinion. He says, don't take style advice from Lee Anderson, and please don't start wearing a tie. Whereas Rob and Julie in Hampshire have written in saying, totally agree with Lee, mate. A tie would be better, but if not a tie, at least do up one button. Maybe there's a compromise. Although she
maybe a bow tie is a compromise.
A bow tie, that would be, or a cravat, or something, I don't know. Although Peter wrote in to say that I wore a tie when Prince Philip passed away, which I did, and Peter said it didn't suit me.
Yeah, there are some people, I think because I'm so used to seeing you without one, it would be odd seeing you with one, and you would look, because you're young people who wear ties, I feel sometimes it gives them a bit of a, like a sixth former going to a job interview kind of
look. I worry it might infantilise quite counterintuitively. I did, however, retweet someone who's doing a poll on Twitter. You can look at my Twitter account, TomHFH, and you can vote in that poll if you want to see. I think it's around 52-48 right now.
So the question is, if the people speak and they say you should wear a tie, are you going to?
Do you know what? If that Twitter poll, that Twitter poll that I've just retweeted comes back with a positive result for wearing a tie, my producer will run out and get one, and I'll put one on this show.
There you are. And you won't reverse the result of that, will you?
Well, we might have to have a people's vote. We'll see.
OK, well, after the break, we'll be talking about the proposed plans to enforce mandatory masks in secondary schools. The news comes in the wake of Prime Minister Boris Johnson reaffirming his commitment to continuing in-person teaching. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Face masks will also be mandatory in school for students for at least the next 3 weeks, and classes may be merged if too many teachers are off sick. These new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of Omicron.
I want to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicentre, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing masks.
Well, Mr. Zahawi also says there's nothing in the data that justifies extending COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory in shops and on public transport, and employees are encouraged to work from home. Well, on Wednesday of this week, the government is going to review those Plan B regulations. In other news now, legal documents Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex abuse case against him are going to be made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew denies any wrongdoing. 2 people are missing after wildfires developed in the US. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying nearly 1,000 homes and buildings. Police investigating the blaze haven't ruled out arson. You're up to date. I'll have more for you at 11 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, secondary school pupils in England will be wearing masks in the classroom from this week, but not their teachers. Pupils will also need to be tested before coming back for the Christmas break. But just yesterday, ministers said there was nothing in the current COVID data to suggest more curbs like these were needed in England.
Yes, well, earlier the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, spoke to GB News. Here's what he had to say.
99.9% of schools were open at the end of last year, and I'm certain they'll do a brilliant job with the testing that we're asking them to do this first week back. I made sure we had enough test kits because we have an alternative route to provide those. You and I would be having a different conversation if I hadn't. And of course, I've also announced as part of Plan B, you'll recall, we had mask wearing in communal parts in schools. The guidance we've suggested is that just whilst Omicron is surging, that students in secondary schools wear masks in the classroom. It's not ideal. We know that the best place for children is to be in school with their friends, learning in front of a teacher. I want to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicentre, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year, then I don't want children to be wearing masks. In fact, I've also asked my team in the department to look at doing a piece of research for the longer term as to the impact of wearing masks in classroom would have on students and on their ability to learn. The UK Health and Security Agency, because of Omicron and because how much more infectious it is, recommended it. We did a piece of work in the department, an observational study with 123 schools which did have masks in classroom, and actually I will share the evidence with Parliament in the next 48 hours on this, and some of the evidence from other countries like Germany. It's one measure of a number of measures. Testing next week this week, forgive me, is really important. And of course the CO2 monitors. I delivered 350,000 CO2 monitors, and because some schools, especially the special schools and alternative provision, may not be able to mitigate for ventilation, I've got 7,000 air purifiers also available for those schools who can't mitigate. I can now see that we probably need the 7,000 air purifiers for those schools who can't easily mitigate, which is why I've made them available to those schools. So I think it's a combination of making sure you've got the data in the first place. I've always said I'll be the evidence-led Secretary of State. That's what I've done throughout my whole career, both in business and in politics. And the evidence suggests that from the CO2 monitoring we've done, that what we've now bought, the 7,000, is about the right number. If other schools need them and they don't qualify for them, I've also set up a marketplace. I announced it at the end of last year, where they can order additional air purifiers as well.
Well, that was Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi speaking to GB News a bit earlier on. But now let's speak to somebody on the ground. Steve Chalk's the founder of Oasis Academies, which is one of the largest multi-academy trusts in England with 52 schools. Thank you for joining us this morning. What do you make of this policy that's come into force until the end of the month, really, about all students having to wear masks, but not teachers?
Well, we were expecting it. Actually, our teachers as well as our students will wear masks in classrooms. Of course, before Christmas, lots of students and staff were choosing to wear masks, but we're grateful for the clarity around this. And predicting it would happen, back at the end of November, we ordered 150,000 masks because we realised there will now be a rush on them. We knew this would happen. We knew that the government would get round to doing this, and so we're ready to go with this. And we think it's a good thing, though, as the minister himself says, we all agree, wearing a mask isn't ideal. Who wants to wear a mask? I never want to wear a mask. But I think this is about keeping schools open, and our students understand that's the best thing for them. It's the best thing for us all.
How enforceable is this as a measure? Obviously, it's a tricky, uncomfortable thing. Children, not always the most ruly people. Is this putting extra pressures on teachers, perhaps, to keep discipline in uniform that's not usually worn?
No, I don't think so. I can only speak for our schools, but I guess this would go for any. This is about secondary schools. Part of education is values, isn't it? And we know that it's not all about me, it's about us. So the things I do are not just there for my satisfaction. They're about keeping other people safe. And I think that our students across the country, we've got 32,000 of them, understand that. They really do. They want to be in schools. They want to keep their teachers safe. And you keep your teachers safe if you wear a mask. Like I say, it's horrid, but if we do it, it won't last that long. If we don't do it, we're going to end up with home learning and year groups and whole schools having to go home.
Yeah, widening the debate now from masks and to Omicron and COVID in general, really. Are you concerned at all that going into the second term, the third term, there'll be disruptions, particularly in terms of exams? Because that's been one key area, hasn't it, throughout the pandemic that has seen a lot of disruption.
Yes, I'm... Do you know, the reality is there are going to be disruptions for children through this term, aren't there? And that means that by the time we reach Easter, we only have one term left of preparation for this year's exams, because as you know, at Easter, that's when you finish all your studies for your A-levels or for your GCSEs. So I think in reality, we're in a situation where I predict exams are not going to take place. What I'd urge government to do is be on the front foot about that, because I think children's mental health, actually the anxiety and stress and worry levels of staff as well, are bound up with not knowing what counts. So what we're trying to do is work with all our children exam years pastorally and sensitively to put in place a readiness for assessments of a different nature. But government could be clear by being by recognising the situation we're in and making an early decision.
I've got to say, I put my head in my hands there when you suggested there might be a third year of no exams. And we know how detrimental that is in terms of getting children onto the next stage in their lives, how much of an equaliser, to some extent, exams can be. And teacher assessment, although many teachers are absolutely fantastic around this country, are just not always the most equitable way to deliver an assessment. And you get this sort of grade inflation that we've seen in the last couple of years that has really devalued the grades of children right across the country. Can we find a different way to move forward with some form of examination?
Well, two things about that. First is we just have to acknowledge where we are. Like we say, we don't like wearing masks. We don't like social distancing. We don't like working at home. We want to be together. But in actual fact, this global pandemic dictates to us what we need to do. So it's not a case of what we think is best. It's what works. And the question was, are we going to have our children going to have their education disrupted during this term? What's your answer? My answer is that is bound to happen. Look at the Omicron rates; they're absolutely massive. I'm social distancing. I'm isolating at the moment myself. I don't feel ill, but I tested positive and I'm at home. So none of us know how many staff are going to come back tomorrow and through this week and what's going to happen in the next few weeks. So I think that we've got to prepare for the reality of the situation we're in. The second thing I'd say is I don't think it's true that exams are better than assessment at all. In fact, lots of countries, developed countries around the world, are shifting away, especially from examinations at the age of 16. Why do you have them? When they were put in place, it was because it marked the end of an education and leaving school. 97% of kids now stay on until the age of 18. We're one of the only countries that still sticks with this. So I think there's a bigger issue to unpack there, which isn't to do with the pandemic. It's just to ask the question, what's best for kids in education? And maybe the pandemic's got something to teach us.
And just finally, you've obviously founded schools and, you care about education a lot. And I would think one of the reasons you do is you want to make sure the most disadvantaged children get a proper shot in life. And what we've seen during the pandemic is disadvantaged kids hit the hardest in lots of ways. How concerned are you that the longer this goes on and the longer the pandemic goes on, that disadvantaged children are going to fall behind so far back that it's going to take years and years to actually get them up to where they need to be?
We're already in that situation, aren't we? The tragedy is that we have thousands, it's estimated around 100,000 children missing from school across the country. That's a figure put together by Ian Duncan Smith and the Centre for Social Justice. Whether that's right or not, it is a huge number of kids who are persistently not in school, who are struggling. And as you say, the less privileged your background, I mean privileged in time, I'm not talking about economics actually, so you can come from a very rich background but not get the parental time that you need, the care that you need, the space that you need, the support that you need. You can come from a background where the economy is difficult, but you do get that wraparound love and care and attention. That's what kids crave, and that's what so many of them have been missing over this last 2 years getting on for now. So that's why we have to keep schools open. So you're driven back to this thing about masks and all the other precautions that, as I say, none of us like and we hope aren't going to last for very long. but we have to do something about this. And we have to put more money into what we're doing. As you know, it was Sir Kevin Collins who said that we needed £13 billion worth of input to just compensate for the loss that so many young people have got. The government supplied just about £1 billion worth. I myself have encountered children subsequently who've attempted suicide, children who are struggling with life, children that have been groomed into gangs. We have to do something about this. You're absolutely right.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your thoughts this morning. Really, really important. And let's just hope that not that many teachers have next week or the next few weeks off. That could really be the damaging point. Let's hope that these measures work to keep schools open and keep teachers in schools as well. Steve Chalk, thank you for joining us here on To The Point.
Yes, I think he makes a really good point there about, just keeping schools open really is the priority. And
absolutely.
So, masks and all these, whatever measures have to be put in place, really. I mean, if it means that it increases the chance that schools will be kept open, I mean, surely it makes them worth it.
I've got to say, the stress that is placed on teachers when other teachers have to go away.
Absolutely.
My mum's a teacher and she's had one of her teachers in her years off just before Christmas. And the amount of workload that was added, it was absolutely horrendous.
They already have a massive workload to begin with, most schools. So, yes, let's hope they do stay open and not too many of them are off. But for now, 20 Conservative MPs and peers, including 5 former ministers, have called on the Prime Minister to tackle the spiralling cost of living. The politicians voiced their concerns in an open letter to the Sunday Telegraph, arguing for a cut in environmental levies and the removal of energy taxes.
Their call follows big increases in the wholesale gas prices. Experts say that average bills could hit £2,000 in 2022. Nearly 30 energy firms have collapsed since August.
That's why Jessica Beard is a personal finance reporter at The Telegraph and joins us now. Thank you for your time this morning. Just give us an idea about where we are at the moment in terms of the cost of energy and what people at home, our viewers, can expect to see over this coming year, because it's set to be quite a difficult one for people who are already struggling with energy prices.
It definitely is. Households across the whole country will see bills go up to about £700 it could increase by in April. The average capped bill at the moment is around about £1,200, but that could rise to above £2,000, some have warned. So that's significant amounts for a lot of people who already can't afford it. So the real squeeze for quite a few households. There's quite a few things in play here. So in the letter that MPs sent to the Prime Minister, they argued that VAT might be an issue, as is the environmental levies that are added to these bills. So there are 2 ways that the government could really tackle the increasing costs.
Now, we don't know how likely the government is to pursue these policies. Maybe more likely to do the VAT cut than the green levy cut because, of course, their COP26 commitments hang heavy. I wonder, what can individuals do as opposed to waiting on the government to take action? Do you have any top tips for people sitting at home worried that their energy bills may well be doubling across this year? What can people do? What measures can they take in their own hands in order to keep those bills as low as humanly possible?
I mean, the first thing is to check their energy supplier, check that they're on the best rate, check whether they're on a fixed rate, on a variable rate, and just really get a whole gauge, get a sense of what your energy bills look like at the moment, so that you can then go from there. Now, small companies have really fared badly with the energy price cap over the past couple of months, and many of them have gone bust. So moving across, people have had to move and change suppliers, which then has cost them a lot more money because suppliers are passing down the cost of changing suppliers. So that's one thing to watch. If you've got a small energy company, maybe think about changing. You can always switch.
OK, and just finally, this off-gem price cap, which sort of affects people's bills, just give us, it changes every year, is that correct? At the start of every new tax year, and what's going to happen to it this year? I believe it's in April, isn't it?
Yes, it's recalculated every April, well, twice a year, April, and then in October, I believe. And what's going to happen is that globally, the price of gas has been increasing. So that will be taken into account with that. And also the environmental levies are meant to increase as well, which means that the bills will just inevitably be pushed up. Now, there is this energy cap has pros and cons. You know, it does protect a lot of the most vulnerable. It's a halfway house at the moment. It's meant to be temporary, but it also has quite a few cons. As I said, it's pushed out a lot of the smaller suppliers. It can dampen competition at times, and it can wipe out some of the cheapest deals in the market, because it means that suppliers are having to they can't charge as much as maybe they need to in some respects, which means that they have to, wipe out their very cheapest deals.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for those tips and just walking us through that. Jessica Beard, their personal finance reporter at The Telegraph.
Yeah, really useful information there for people watching.
Yeah, it does seem a bit, there's not much people can do really, is there? But I suppose just make sure you are on that, the lowest tariff possible, really. That's, I suppose, what people can do in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that I've been pretty upset by the number of companies that have gone bust through this government intervention. It's the government saying you can't charge more that has meant that 24-odd companies have actually gone bust, and that may well be a counterproductive measure, that price cap.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's go to some of your views. Tom still has that poll running, so let's start with that.
Well,
on
I tweeted out this poll that actually someone else did the poll. I've retweeted it. It's had over 1,500 votes, and I have to say, the people that want me to wear a tie, it's 49.7%. Wow. And no is just winning with 50.3%. What a tiny lead there. Do vote in that poll if you have a Twitter account. It's on my personal Twitter account, Tom HFH, and we're gonna cut it off at around 11 o'clock. And if
yes wins,
my producer will come through and bring a tie, not one that I've ever seen before, and I'll put it on live on air. How about that?
Well, yeah. So go and vote in that poll. Just a few more views. We spoke at the top of the hour, at 9 o'clock that was, about whether the countryside is. Ben Fogle, broadcaster, has said it's a white middle class theme park. That's
if anything, I thought the countryside was green.
Well, good one, Tom. Not. But we've had lots of views about this, and it is splitting some people, I have to say. Most people are saying no, it's not racist at all. The countryside's for everybody. It's very welcoming. But Sean has got in touch and says Ben Fogle is right. The countryside is indeed racist, and he lists a few anecdotes to say why he thinks the countryside is racist. He says he's followed around stores. People will get it from their seats if he's trying to sit next to them. I'm assuming he's an ethnic minority here. Says he was taking down his Christmas lights, and then the police turned up. Somebody had reported a burglary, apparently. This is in the countryside. So split views there. So some people do experience racism in the countryside, but a lot of people are also saying it's a very welcoming place as well.
Well, keep all your thoughts coming into us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more on today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Now looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking showery for many, with colder air working its way southwards across northern areas. Let's take a look at the details. Many of the showers should have eased from southwest England, but it will still be a cloudy and breezy picture, with rain not too far off the south coast. It's a similar story for London and the southeast, with a fair amount of dry, if not rather cloudy weather throughout Monday lunchtime. It will still be on the mild side though. Scattered showers will be affecting much of Wales, with brighter weather further north and cloudier skies in the south. Temperatures will be up to 11 degrees Celsius. It's bright skies for much of the Midlands though, with a few showers are likely across Herefordshire and Shropshire. Temperatures at lunchtime up to 9 or 10 degrees Celsius for many areas, with a brisk southwesterly wind. Some sunshine for much of Yorkshire, but will run into thicker cloud towards County Durham and Northumberland, with some patchy rain arriving on the scene by lunchtime. Temperatures now back to single figures. A cold front bringing about chillier weather will be sat over central and southern Scotland at lunchtime, with temperatures continuing to fall throughout the afternoon. That same weather front will be making inroads into the north of Northern Ireland, but at this stage it should still be dry and perhaps quite bright for Belfast and Armagh. Rain and hill snow will be coming south into northern England this evening, becoming very windy with snow showers in northern Scotland. Expect a temperature drop throughout the day, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, standing in for Patrick today, and of course your regular host, Mercy Maroki. We're here for another hour discussing the day's top stories.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, GBviews@GB News, and as well as your views on everything we're talking about this morning. We want to hear on whether you think Tom should wear a tie. He's got a poll on his Twitter at the moment. It's something that's been splitting viewers this morning, so go and vote on that as well, and we'll be reading those out throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 11 o'clock. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Face masks will also be mandatory in school for students for at least the next 3 weeks in England, and classes may be merged if too many teachers are off sick. Well, these new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of Omicron. Nadeem Zahawi says schools must do everything they can to protect face-to-face learning.
to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicentre, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing masks.
Meanwhile, Mr Sahawi also says there's nothing in the data that justifies extending current COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory on public transport and employees are encouraged to work from home. Well, on Wednesday of this week, the government is reviewing the current Plan B COVID regulations. In other news now, a legal document Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex case against him. It's going to be unsealed and made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between Virginia Giuffre and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Ms Giuffre alleges that Prince Andrew sexually assaulted her when she was 17. The Prince denies any wrongdoing. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition calling for Tony Blair to be stripped of his knighthood. The former Prime Minister was included in the New Year's honours list, but critics say the 2003 invasion of Iraq makes him unsuitable for the Queen's highest honour. Over 360,000 people have supported the campaign to take back his new title. Tributes have been paid to a 14-year-old girl who died after being hit by a suspected drug driver on New Year's Eve. Olivia Collette was struck by a grey Mercedes in Rowley Regis in the West Midlands and died at the scene. Her family say she was the brightest star in their lives. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of causing death by driving while under the influence of drugs. He's been released under investigation pending further inquiries. Ministers are being urged to bring in a new law that would guarantee all workers 2 weeks of paid leave after a bereavement. The SNP's Patricia Gibson is bringing forward a private member's bill to Westminster. She says it would allow people time to grieve without worrying about financial pressures. 2 people are missing after wildfires in the US. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying nearly 1,000 homes and buildings. Police don't know yet what caused the blaze.
The origin of the fire hasn't been confirmed. It's suspected to be power lines, but we are investigating that today. And we have folks on the ground as we speak trying to pinpoint that cause.
As many of us took up DIY, brought new pets or learnt a new outdoor hobby in lockdown, thousands of us also gave ourselves injuries in the process. According to new NHS figures, our lockdown activities led to hospital admissions for over 8,000 tool accidents, more than 7,000 dog bites and over 5,000 people falling off playground equipment. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Right now, though, back to the point.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood, who's standing in for Patrick Christie's today. We've got a show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion as well on the big stories of the day. So here's what's on the menu.
Concerns about the Omicron variant continue to affect our daily lives, with hospitality venues in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland still navigating rules to curb the spread. Some hospitals are now banning visitors amid a rise in admissions. We'll be live with our North East reporter, Rachel Sweeney, to find out more.
Yes, and Ghislaine Maxwell was, of course, found guilty by a US jury of charges relating to sex trafficking during her relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This has now raised questions about where this leaves Prince Andrew, who has had sex abuse allegations levelled against him. Allegations, of course, he's always denied. Well, we'll be asking what Maxwell's convictions means for the Prince and the royal family going forward.
And it's been a difficult time for hospitality during the pandemic, but many still celebrated over the festive period. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been out asking the people of Grantham. Let us know what you were up to.
Yes, we've got that all coming up and much more across the programme. Get in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We've been reading those out over the last hour already, and we've been asking you whether you think Tom should wear a tie, because he was told by Lee Anderson MP, Tory MP, earlier in an interview that he he needs to put a tie on.
Do you know what, Mercy? Quick email here. I think Tom and Mercy should swap tops. Mercy would look great in a shirt and tie. How about that?
Maybe I'll wear a shirt and tie tomorrow. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, now, as we enter 2022, many of you may have been hoping that COVID would become a relic of 2021. But despite data suggesting there's no need for further restrictions, some new measures are being introduced.
Yes, secondary school pupils in England will be wearing masks in the classroom from this week when schools reopen, and they'll need to be tested for COVID before returning from the festive season.
But just yesterday, ministers said there was nothing in the current COVID data to suggest more curbs like these were needed in England. Of course, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, measures including restrictions on hospitality have been in place since before the new year.
Yes, well, GB News' national reporter, Paul Hawkins, joins us live from Westminster right now. Paul, just give us an update on what these new rules coming into force when schools reopen will mean.
Yeah, you mentioned some of them there, Mercy. Getting pupils to wear face masks all day at school in England until the 26th of January. That hasn't happened in England since May. It's already mandatory in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And it is part of the government's plan to try and reduce the rate of transmission of Omicron in the communities and in schools, and essentially to stop teachers contracting Omicron and then having to self-isolate. In addition to that, they are telling pupils to get tested before they start the new school term tomorrow, and then twice a week using lateral flow tests. And if schools do experience any staffing shortages, the advice is to try and merge classes so that they can continue face-to-face learning. They don't want to go back to kids learning from home, not only because it's bad for children's education, but also, of course, there's a knock-on effect for the economy. There's an impact on parents if they're working from home, and that is the current advice. And then there's also, and for parents who can't work from home, they are then pulled back out of work and they can't work. So there's a knock-on effect for the economy there. Really, this isn't so much about the severity of Omicron. We know that it is milder. It's about stopping it from reaching the more vulnerable in society and stopping those from having to self-isolate. There's a big impact on the public sector. Bosses in the public sector being told to plan for up to 25% absence rates, not just in schools, but also in hospitals, in social care, care homes, and also in transport. So big implications for staffing in the public sector, and that's why the Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi has been outlining these measures for schools, which will be in place until the 26th of January, which is when the Plan B measures at the moment will come to an end.
Well, Paul, thank you for bringing us that update there about masks having to be worn in secondary schools. That's the government guide. Is it mandatory? That's what I'm not clear on. It's mandatory guidance until the 26th of January.
Mandatory guidance sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't
Yes.
it? There. Well, I suppose schools will be enforcing that.
Yes, indeed. Well, in the northeast of England, some hospitals are banning all visitors due to a rise in COVID cases. Our reporter Rachel Sweeney is live for us at the University Hospital of North Tees in Stockton. Rachel, why are hospitals doing this? Is it hospitals with very high cases, or are they just being cautious?
Well, the County Durham and Darlington NHS Foundation Trust has just announced that it's banning visitors from all of its hospitals. That's on top of the three we already knew about here at the University Hospital of North Tees, and also Sunderland Royal and South Tyneside District Hospitals. They were announced over the weekend. There are spikes in community cases. There are local outbreaks, quite a lot in Durham, so I'm not surprised by the announcement by County Durham and Darlington NHS Foundation Trust. Both them and the North Tees and Hartlepool NHS Foundation Trust said that this decision has been very difficult, but it's one that they had to make. Now, in exceptional circumstances, people will be allowed inside, but families are encouraged to call wards directly and plead their case, as it were. I've been speaking to a number of our viewers about their opinions. One man, Chris Clark, said that he's due to be a dad, and it's the birth of his son or daughter that he's worried about not being able to attend. The backlash from this has really been surrounding scans, baby scans and appointments, that sort of thing, but it does look like that's been treated slightly differently. In my area, you can attend a scan, you can attend a birth, but I know that in Birmingham there's been a huge backlash because an NHS Foundation Trust there has stopped that altogether.
And Rachel, is this just for people sort of with overnight stays in hospital, sort of inpatient, so to speak, or do people who are going into appointments, for example, are they allowed to bring somebody along as well?
Well, different NHS Foundation Trusts seem to have slightly different rules. Here at the University Hospital of North Tees, you can't take anybody into an inpatient appointment. Again, with maternity wards, consultation appointments you have to attend on your own, where a lot of women attend them anyway. Partners can attend scans, but that's a very different case in other areas of the country.
Well, thank you for bringing us that update. Let's hope, I suppose, more hospitals don't take that. I mean, that's what I want to say, but then again, I understand why they're doing it. But
it's hard to know, particularly over these next 2 weeks, where there's going to be that pressure that came about from all that mixing at Christmas. Potentially this will be the crunch point.
The last thing somebody needs when they're in hospital and they're miserable and it's the festive period is not being able to see their loved ones. So it must be very depressing.
Especially if they're old and vulnerable, they may well need someone to help them in. I hope there are exceptions around that.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's go to some of your views. We've been speaking a lot this morning about the countryside after Ben Fogel said it's a white middle class playground. Is that what he said? A white middle class theme park, I think is what he said. And lots of you have been getting in touch to give your views on whether you think the countryside is indeed racist. A lot of you are saying that it's not. And if I can just find where, so Malcolm here says the majority of ethnic minorities don't like the countryside. So that's hinting to, I suppose, the idea. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily accurate. Who knows? But that's hinting to the idea that maybe it's a personal preference, because the point is a lot of ethnic minorities are not going into the countryside. 1% of national park visitors, I think, are from an ethnic minority background. So the figures do show that. Maybe it's a preference thing. Maybe they just don't fancy it. It could be that.
It could just be where people live.
Yeah.
And it tends to be that ethnic minority people in the UK tend to live in cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is true.
It makes it a much further distance to go to get to the countryside.
Yes, and Michael here says the countryside is not racist, but there may be racists living there, as in the towns and cities. So basically just saying, of course, there's a bit of racism in the countryside, like there is a bit of racism everywhere, but it's not this big issue that people are making it out to be.
And Philip has got in touch to say that Ben Fogel is trying to say he knows what's best for black people living in cities, so trying to control their lives. He doesn't like that attitude.
Yes, and there's been quite a debate this morning, hasn't there, about whether or not you should wear a tie.
There has. There's a Twitter poll that seems to be about 50-50 right now on whether or not I should wear them. But some of the people have written in. Fusby has written in to say he couldn't care less. Anna Marie says no top button or tie, in a word, stuffy. Edna says I like my Ed likes my casual look, whereas Ruth says I look scruffy. So
well, that's pleasant. But Elaine has a middle ground, I think, maybe. Why don't you wear a tie but wear it very loosely?
I think if anything that makes it even less smart. I did see
probably not the solution.
Some of the suggestions were to just do up this button.
Yeah.
So it's more like that. Like Patrick, how he wears his
Yeah,
shirt
I mean, I'm not that bothered, really, to be honest with you. And I would find it odd seeing you in a tie.
It's amazing that it's incited such debate amongst the viewership.
Some of our viewers have been pointing to the idea of the fact that gentlemen not being encouraged to wear ties these days is showing a slipping standards in the country. And
I blame David Cameron, really. It's all his fault.
It is.
Well, anyway.
Talking of ex-prime minister.
Talking of ex-prime ministers, well, hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition. That was an excellent segue.
Thank you. Very proud of that.
Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition calling for Tony Blair to be stripped of his knighthood. The former prime minister was included in the New Year's honours list, but critics say the 2003 invasion of Iraq makes him unsuitable for the Queen's highest honour. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, defended the move, stating, "Whatever people think, it is one of the toughest jobs in the world, and I think it is respectful and it is the right thing to do, whether it is to Tony Blair or to David Cameron. They should all be offered that knighthood when they finish as Prime Minister."
I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think there should be a value judgment involved in granting knighthood.
Isn't the title former Prime Minister enough?
Well, yeah, and it can't just be that, oh, you were Prime Minister, so you automatically deserve a knighthood,
with
surely.
Tony Blair, I mean, we're seeing in the polls right now how difficult it is to win 2 elections, let alone 3 elections. And the fact that Tony Blair was the longest-serving Prime Minister of this century, he's sort of in that bracket with Margaret Thatcher, with Winston Churchill, with Gladstone, with Disraeli, with Pitt the Younger. These sort of figures who have been in that office for such a long time, I think, are more significant, whatever you think of their policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no denying Blair as a Prime Minister. It's completely significant. I mean, he's a cultural figure almost, isn't he? Because he's so symbolic of the sort of late 90s and early noughties.
Yeah.
And so I get it.
Many of the institutions we're very critical of as well. I mean, lots of people think that devolution hasn't gone that well. Lots of people think that the institution of the Supreme Court. I mean, there are lots of criticisms of his time, but it was a significant time. And I think that's probably right to be respected. But also, he's been quite good in the last year on COVID. He's been proposing...
He's been vocal, that's for sure.
He's been proposing solutions that don't involve lockdowns.
Yeah, and let's not forget, he also has that Blair Institute, doesn't he? He does a lot of work on diplomacy and sort of development abroad. So
I think if he doesn't
it's
have
one that split people.
Who can, really? I mean, I think he's more deserving than most singers are.
Yeah, there are some people who get one after just a couple of sporting achievements here and there and things like that. But let us know what you think about Blair being granted this knighthood. But after the break, could Prince Andrew be stripped of his title as the Duke of York? According to reports, courtiers are hoping so. We'll bring you the latest after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking showery for many, with colder air working its way southwards across northern areas. Let's take a look at the details. Many of the showers should have eased from the southwest of England, but it will still be a cloudy and breezy picture with rain not too far off the south coast. It's a similar story for London and the southeast, with a fair amount of dry, if not rather cloudy, weather throughout Monday lunchtime. It will be still on the mild side, though. Scattered showers will be affecting much of Wales, with brighter weather further north and the cloudier skies in the south. Temperatures will be up to 11 degrees Celsius. It's bright skies for much of the Midlands, however. There are a few showers are likely towards Herefordshire and Shropshire. Temperatures at lunchtime up at 9 or 10 Celsius for many areas, with a brisk southwesterly wind. Some sunshine for much of Yorkshire, but we'll run into thicker clouds towards County Durham and Northumberland, with some patchy rain arriving on the scene by lunchtime. Temperatures by now back into single figures. A cold front bringing about chillier weather will be sat over central and southern Scotland at lunchtime, with temperatures continuing to fall throughout the afternoon. That same weather front will be making inroads into the north of Northern Ireland, but at this stage it should still be dry and perhaps quite bright for Belfast and Armagh. Now, rain and hill snow will be coming south into northern England this evening, becoming very windy with snow showers in northern Scotland. Expect a temperature drop throughout the day, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the bank holiday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Now, socialite Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of recruiting and trafficking young girls to be sexually abused by her now deceased partner and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. A US jury convicted her of 5 out of the 6 charges, and she's yet to face sentencing and has a separate trial scheduled for perjury charges.
Now, military chiefs and royal courtiers are reportedly planning to strip Prince Andrew of his Duke of York title and send him into a form of internal exile over his connections to the late paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. The prince is facing a lawsuit from Epstein survivor Virginia Giuffre, who insists that she was trafficked to the prince by Maxwell and Epstein when she was just 16, a claim he has always denied.
Yes, well, a legal document by Prince Andrew's lawyers hope that Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex case against him is going to be made public. His accuser, Virginia Giuffre, entered into a settlement agreement in 2009 with the Duke of York's former friend and, of course, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The prince's lawyers claim that the contents of this document will end her claim against him. While joining us to discuss this is Jenny Bond, a royal commentator and journalist. Thank you for joining us. Now, as I understand it, the Queen would have the final word, so to speak, when it came to stripping the Duke of York off his title. Is that true?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It would be her decision to do this, but I do think that the palace perhaps should be taken at their word. They say this is uninformed speculation at the moment. They're certainly not going to give comment on an ongoing legal process. It would be extraordinary, on the other hand, if they hadn't had some discussions, the court is at least, about the action that's going to be taken if, and it is a very big if, Prince Andrew is convicted of these allegations, which he strenuously denied. So I think we have to wait the outcome of this civil case. Having said that, clearly it would seem most unjust if he were allowed to keep his military appointments when Prince Harry has been stripped of his for merely stepping back from his royal duties.
No, that would seem like a particular injustice, although The Queen is known to be relatively close to the Duke of York, has always had a very soft spot for him. How difficult must this be for her right now?
Well, she's always been very close to Harry as well, particularly close to Harry after the death of his mother. Obviously, it's a terrible dilemma for the Queen. Poor Queen, you know, she's nearly 96 now, and this is meant to be a year of great celebration, her platinum jubilee. And yet this civil case, and it is a civil case, there's no question of Prince Andrew going to jail, but this is hanging over the Prince, her favoured son, and the whole of the royal family. The whole brand is being tarnished by this. And then, of course, later in the year, there's Prince Harry's memoirs are coming out. So it's going to be a very tricky year for her.
And what do you think, you know, this time next year, when we're looking back, what will we be thinking of the royal family? Because they do enjoy massive support amongst the British public and indeed internationally. Is this the year that there could be significant reputational damage for them that might be very long-lasting indeed?
Well, you know, I've reported on the royals for more than 30 years, and I don't think this compares with the Annus Horribilis, which was 1992, when so much went wrong. Marriages broke up left, right and centre. Andrew Morton's book came out about Diana. Windsor Castle caught fire, and numerous other disasters befell the royal family. They survived that, and there were times when we didn't think they would. They will survive this. Of course they will. The Queen is immensely popular. But this is a very, very pinnacle week for this court case. Today, as you say, the document is going to be released, this sealed document, which Prince Andrew's lawyers claim will release him from any further court action taken by Virginia Giuffre. And tomorrow, there will be a ruling in New York as to whether the whole case should be dismissed, which Andrew's lawyers say it should be. And the other side is calling for some, I mean, it gets very murky and very messy. They're calling for evidence that the Duke indeed could not sweat, as he claimed, and therefore couldn't have been sweating in Tramp nightclub when he was allegedly with Virginia Giuffre. And they're going to be asking for corroborative evidence that he was indeed at the Pizza Express in Woking on the night in question. Neither of these incidents have been proven by his side. And in fact, he has said so far, Prince Andrew's lawyers have said they haven't got any corroborative evidence. So it's a very messy week and a very crucial week for Prince Andrew.
But even if Prince Andrew managed to wriggle out of this in court, there's still the court of public opinion that really does matter. Is there any way back for him now, or is he really just persona non grata?
Well, I think we should be careful of saying wriggling out. You know, this is a civil law case, and a judge, and if it comes to it, a jury will rule. And I think the man is innocent until proven guilty. That is the way we work, and we should be careful of that. But there's no doubt that his judgment, if nothing else, has been called into question by the fact that he has had friendships not with just one sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, but now we know two, a very long-standing friendship with Ghislaine Maxwell, which goes back to university days. And he was a stalwart friend of Ghislaine's. So yes, his judgment certainly has been brought into question. And yes, all of this has had an impact on the brand of royalty. So it's going to be very difficult for him to come back to any kind of public life. I think absolutely that won't happen. And I think if he is found guilty of these allegations, which he denies, then the Queen would have to think very hard about taking his military appointments and any other honorary titles away from him.
Well, Jenny Bond, thank you very much for joining us this morning to go through all of that in such a comprehensive way. Very difficult week ahead for the royal reputation. Thank you.
Yes, well, we've been talking this morning about the important things in life, like Tom's tie, or lack of a tie. We're asking you on Twitter whether he should wear it, because you've got Lee Anderson, the MP who you were interviewing earlier, he said that you should...
He said I should wear a tie.
Yes, so we've been asking you that this morning.
A number of people have commented on Lee Anderson's fashion sense himself.
Wasn't he wearing a hoodie?
Maybe he wasn't wearing a hoodie, he was wearing a black shirt, though.
OK.
Make of that what you will.
OK, well, get in touch with us and think and let us know whether you think he should, because we will close that poll very shortly. And if it's a yes, he has promised to put on a tie. So there you go. But after the break, we'll be joined by our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, to discuss the political prospects of the country in 2020. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Face masks will also be mandatory in school students in England for at least the next 3 weeks, and classes may be merged if too many teachers are off sick. The new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of Omicron.
I want to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicentre, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing masks.
Mr Zahawi also said there is nothing in the data that justifies extending COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory in shops and on public transport, and employees are encouraged to work from home. The government's going to review these Plan B regulations on Wednesday. In other news now, legal documents Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex abuse case against him are going to be made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew denies any wrongdoing. 2 people are missing after wildfires developed in the US. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying nearly 1,000 homes and buildings. Police investigating the blaze haven't ruled out arson. You are up to date. I'll be back with more on all of today's top stories at 12 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, new figures show that lockdown activities led to thousands more people attending hospital. Repeated restrictions meant many turned to DIY, getting new pets and engaging in outdoor pursuits. According to NHS figures, it led to over 8,000 accidents with tools, over 7,000 dog bites and more than 5,000 people falling off playground equipment.
Yeah, I don't think that's surprising, is it, necessarily? Because the longer you spend at home, I suppose, the more liable you are to injuries.
Although I suppose fewer people being run over on roads. And
so it would have shifted, right? It would have shifted. 5,000 people falling off playground equipment. I thought playground was shut half the time, to be honest.
Maybe that's the problem. They're climbing over all those barriers and stuff.
That's what it is. 8,000 accidents as well with tools, which suggests poor DIY on the part of, dare I say it, many men attempting to put up shelves which they're not qualified to do. Could that be why that was?
Well, or maybe that's been a useful learning experience.
Yes.
Necessary accidents that mean the next shelf they put up will be perfect.
Is that what you tell yourself when you have a
time.
DIY?
Every time I bash my thumb.
Accident.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let us know as well if you had any lockdown accidents.
Well, it's been a big year for Northern Ireland. Loyalist riots in April, debates on the Northern Irish Protocol, and restriction after restriction on masks, hospitality, and socialising across Ulster. Well, but there is hope for. But where is the hope for the province in 2022 as it heads into a May election? Here to help us find out is Dougie Beattie, our GB News Northern Ireland reporter. Welcome to the programme, Dougie.
Well, hello and welcome to Cumber in County Down. This is a very midsummer village. It's middle class. It's very high employment here, most of it in the private sector, and those are the ones that have probably suffered the most because of the lockdown restrictions here in Northern Ireland. Now, we are going to the polls next year, which very much means that a lot of the stuff that should be done and should be going through won't be going through because, of course, those political parties, as it is in England, Scotland and Wales, will be playing till their electorate. And I look back at the year and forward to what's coming in Northern Ireland.
Anybody here or anywhere else in Northern Ireland who has any basic understanding of Irish history think it would be a good idea to put border posts on the island of Ireland. I'm not sure they do.
This is not the way forward. Politics is how we're going to resolve these issues around the protocol. We're making progress. We didn't have violence over the summer, and that's when we made the progress.
Government needs to take a hold of this situation, recognise what they've done, and if they didn't intend to subjugate the Act of Union, then they need to reverse it by repudiating the protocol.
So the principle is that's important to unions, and we want the substance put back in now, which would balance then, any agreement.
2021 has seen political understanding set back 20 years. Arguments over the protocol, culture and the past now dominate our headlines and feature highly in our courts. The lack of clear direction around COVID and the hospitality business has been an embarrassment for this executive.
Pre-COVID, we're Northern Ireland's fourth largest private sector employer. By a third of all Northern agri-food, account for 2/3 of tourism spend. Today, we estimate just in the Christmas period alone, our industry has lost between 250 to 300 million. That's the money that carries us through January and February. We are officially open, but effectively closed.
Wholesalers and retailers also struggle to see the wisdom in a government controlled by a huge public sector and no clear lines of communication or planning.
Unfortunately, the worst jurisdiction has been the Northern Ireland Executive. It's the not knowing is the hardest part for us as businesses. They don't understand that hospitality has a supply chain behind that, be it food, drink, whatever, fresh veg, fresh food, and we have to try and plan, and without any kind of level of guidance or thought process, that is very, very difficult. Throughout this pandemic, we haven't even had rates relief in our business as a food wholesaler. From all of those lockdowns, the amount of lost stock is in the tens of thousands of pounds for us as a business. And the view has been, well, that's a too difficult box to tick, so we just have to deal with that.
Inflation is causing huge problems, especially in farming. Farmers are asking for flexibility around legislation to cushion the financial shocks around fuel, fertiliser and feed.
Coming out of a pandemic, I think the rules and regulations would need to be eased. They weren't enforced during the pandemic. Our inspections were eased off till 2 years, 3-year period, similar to MOTs and cars. The pandemic has actually showed us that these things can be eased off, that they don't have to be done every year, that the rules and regulations and stipulations, they don't have to be enforced till such a degree that it's crippling us.
2022 is an election year and all parties are now playing to their electorate. That means very little will be achieved and nationalists will be pushing for this election to be turned into a border poll. This is the Irish border. Right now I'm in the EU and across that stretch of water behind me is the UK. This piece of land has been fought upon for generations. Now it's about to be fought over, and not by those who can't decide the rules of how to worship the same God, but by those who can't decide the rules of how to trade with the same people. The Irish roads between the UK and the EU have no border posts and only small signs telling you about your speed limits, letting you know if you're in kilometres or miles per hour. Northern Ireland is part of the 5th largest economy in the world. The UK's gross domestic product is in around $3 trillion. The Republic of Ireland is $388 billion, and about 20% of that comes from Britain. As elections come into view, will it be COVID, the protocol, or the border poll that dominate? Dougie Beattie, GB News, on the Irish border. Well, you can see from that report Northern Ireland has a hard year ahead of it. Many of the big infrastructure projects and so forth that were put in place, I mean there was 65 million put in place for the A5 from Omagh right up into Derry. That will probably not take place in this term, and there's a lot of stuff in and around historical inquiries which the British government wants to put to bed very, very quickly, which will also cause some problems inside Northern Ireland.
Well, thank you for that, Dougie. It's a really, really interesting situation. And I wonder how much the surge, the apparent surge of Sinn Féin in the Republic may well affect voting behaviour in Northern Ireland, because as far as I can see in all the latest polls, it's not something that many people in the United Kingdom have reported on, but it's a really concerning situation for many that Sinn Féin seem to be surging really quite far ahead in the Republic.
Well, they are, and credit to them. I mean, they've got their position exactly right where they want to go. They've got their message out where they want to go. No matter what you think of them, they are a very effective electoral team. The problem being is when they get into power, there is only so much of a budget in the Republic of Ireland. You've got to remember there's only about 5 million people, just over 5 million, I think 7 million in the whole island of Ireland. Their public sector in the Republic is about a third of the size that it is in Northern Ireland. So, you know, it's okay for Sinn Féin to backseat drive, and that's the same with any political party in the world. Once you get the actual reins and the steering wheel and you're asked to drive that machine, it's a totally different thing. It is with envious eyes that I have always looked at the Republic of Ireland's government, because they have to do what has to be done. There's nobody there to pick up the pieces for them. And in Northern Ireland, the biggest problem is that we have a devolved assembly, and some of those seats, those MLAs may only be getting those seats by about 100 votes. So when it comes to making hard decisions, they don't want to make those hard decisions in their backyard. Whereas in the Republic of Ireland, Sinn Féin is about to learn they have to make very, very hard decisions and make coalition governments with people that they may not necessarily get on with, and they may get one go in those polls and may find out that the next time round that might not be an option for them.
Now, of course, the unionist vote is splintering, not only between the DUP and the UUP, but also traditional unionist Voice, the TUV, and actually many former UUP voters going off to the Alliance, that ambiguous party affiliated to some extent with the Liberal Democrats as well. To what extent, in your opinion, in your analysis, could this well be the first election whereby a unionist does not get the position of First Minister and, in fact, goes down to that Deputy First Minister post?
I think it is very, very likely that is going to happen. I think that the Alliance Party will do quite well in these polls. But actually, it's a very good question for me, because when I am looking for those interviews with ministers here, with Skype, etc., and Zoom, ministers now choose where they go to be questioned. They no longer do the big press conferences where you can ask them really hard questions about where they are spending public money. And the Alliance Party and the SDLP particularly are staying away from any sort of trouble. They're keeping their head down and they're not trying to get involved in any of the day-to-day political dust-ups that are happening, and that's because they think they're ahead in the polls. I believe the Alliance Party will take a substantial amount, but I don't think the DUP is as badly wounded as it is. I think realistically we are going to see a Sinn Féin First Minister. I think at that point the DUP will probably be second. It is a fight for the Ulster Unionists, I think, for their very survival at this point. And don't forget that the Alliance Party are also taking, in those last European elections, Martina Anderson lost loads of her votes to the Alliance. So Sinn Féin are also losing votes to the Alliance Party, and that itself could be quite tricky.
Really, really interesting situation there. No doubt we will be returning to it as we get closer to the polls. But my gosh, a Sinn Féin First Minister, that is quite a prospect. Dougie Beattie, thank you so much for bringing us that expert analysis on To The Point this morning.
Yes, now for those in England, this year's festive period was relatively restriction-free. However, many restrictions were in place in hospitality across Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And with Omicron cases rising fast, many people avoided celebrating in hospitality venues altogether.
We'll be speaking to a hotel owner very shortly, but before we do, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis went out to Grantham to ask people there how they did celebrate Christmas and New Year's this year.
Spent Christmas Day on our own, me and my husband, at our house. We didn't see our family, and that was in order to then be able to celebrate for New Year's Eve. So we had quite a quiet Christmas this year. We didn't go to any bars or pubs. And then New Year's Eve, we went to a big party and did tests before we went.
We went out New Year's Eve afternoon. So I was at a local restaurant, the wife and I, because she works retail, so she was working the following day. So we were eating and drinking in the afternoon. The kids, who are both grown up now, were out in the pubs in the evening.
We would usually probably go to the pub for a few drinks, but we didn't this year because obviously COVID is still around, this new variant, and we just wanted to keep our family as safe as possible.
We went out for meals and we also had Christmas with the family. We didn't really alter any plans, and the reason for that was because we're all vaccinated. As requested by the government, and we just took precautions as and when needed.
Because of mine and my husband's age, we feel a lot more vulnerable, so we prefer not to go to places. We could have gone to somewhere on New Year's Eve, which is very close to us, but we chose not to.
Normally I would go out and about and possibly go to a football match and things like that, but not now, no.
I spent it with my daughter. Only one son came with me, so there's only three of us, and we didn't go out socialising, and although I've been boosted, I feel a bit safer having that.
We felt really confident about New Year's. Obviously we had loads of family and friends around, and we really enjoyed doing what we were doing. Like, there was karaoke involved, everyone was just having fun, and although there was like old people like my girlfriend's nana there involved, like we weren't afraid of Omicron at all. Like, it was just us being together, like in unity, you know, in harmony and peace. So there was nothing to be afraid of, mate, honestly.
This is the new future. Just get on with it. Wear your mask when you go into a restaurant. Sit down, then take it off and have your meal or drink or whatever. And use a bit of common sense. Life has got to get on. We've got to get on with it.
Well, that's what the people of the
Unity,
public,
harmony and
yeah,
peace.
had
I'm
to
not sure
say.
how
Unity,
peaceful
harmony,
my
and
New
peace.
Year's was.
I actually spent it in bed personally.
Wow, a very
cuddling
peaceful.
my puppy, who was terrified of the fireworks.
Oh, unity, harmony and peace for you and your puppy then.
Yes,
wow.
indeed. Well, here to give us an industry perspective is Stephen Montgomery, a hotel owner and spokesperson from the Scottish Hospitality Group. Thank you for joining us this morning, Stephen. Hospitality's been probably the hardest hit sector, really, hasn't it, during the pandemic. How is hospitality shaping up at the moment for you?
Good morning and Happy New Year to you all. It's a bleak start to 2022, I think everybody would agree, given the fact of what we had for December, where the trade in Scotland is probably in the region of £1 billion of turnover down, which would have been to get us through January, February and March. So it's a bleak start to the new year. We haven't any idea whether this 3-week short sharp shock that we're in just now will actually last just 3 weeks. So we really need some heads up from the Scottish Government here where that's going to be, because we're only a month away from the Six Nations, where the first match is the 5th of April, the 5th of February, where Scotland take on England at Murrayfield, and that's a 68,000 seat capacity stadium. So.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty worrying prospect. Of course, we saw on the front page of the Scottish Times this morning that there's an expectation that these restrictions could go on well into the spring, long after the 5th of February. Do you feel that there'll become a point where the people of Scotland look at what's going on in England? Indeed, many of them travel down to places like Carlisle and Newcastle to celebrate New Year's. Will there come a point when the Scottish people think, hang on, why are we being so much more restricted than those south of the border?
I think we've always been right the way through this whole pandemic. We've had severe restrictions ahead of the UK, the rest of the UK. So it's nothing new to us. I mean, now we have 1 metre social distancing between different groups. We've got table seated service and all that kind of thing. So while the rest of the UK, well, certainly England, can enjoy the freedoms that they should be having. But however, I'm not a clinician and I'm not a politician. Sometimes I think I could probably do a better job. However, it's just one of those things that we have to put up with, and our licences are at risk if we do decide that we have to go against it. So we have to obey what we're told to do, which is just one of those things with being a licensee of a hotel or a pub.
What kind of support have you been receiving from the UK and or the Scottish government throughout this?
I think if you look at the next tranche of funding, they're supposed to be getting, people in Scotland will get up to £6,800 of a one-off payment. The lower rateable value people will get £4,500 of a one-off payment, while our colleagues in England are getting, I think it's up to £6,000 per venue. However, the First Minister did say that she was paying out more money than our colleagues in England. But if you take it into the fact that the restrictions we've been put in place over the last month, we're getting very, very little. And if you take it across one of our members who their weekly wage bill is £200,000 a week, and they stand to get a one-off payment of just over £100,000, it just shows you the level of funding. And whilst the UK government gave us furlough through the first lockdown, which ended last year, which we were all grateful for because it kept our staff in jobs, we now see the point where we're the only part of the UK who are under a 10-day isolation ban for the new Omicron, where everybody else is 7 days. Very few of our staff are getting Omicron or getting COVID from within the premises. A lot of them are majority getting it through family contacts. So they're actually at home self-isolating whilst testing negative. And on average, the average employee will be losing between £650 and £700 over that 10 days because there is absolutely no support for them apart from the statutory sick pay.
Well, that's a very concerning situation there. Well, look, Stephen, we wish you all the best in your venues, and hopefully the restrictions will lift sooner rather than later and we can get back to some normality. Stephen Montgomery there, a hotel owner and spokesperson from the Scottish Hospitality Group. But now that time has come where we reveal the results of the poll that we've been holding this morning in relation to Tom's tie.
Yes, I have to say it's not a poll that I produced, that GBNews produced. It's one that someone who replied to a tweet of ours put out, having seen Lee Anderson's suggestion there, and it's been incredibly close.
Yeah, it couldn't be any closer. Let's be honest, could it?
No. Do you want to reveal to the good viewers of GBNews exactly what's going on?
We will. So the question was. Lee Anderson told Tom Harwood that he should do up a top button and wear a tie. So it was, do you agree whether Tom should wear a tie? Yes, 49.8%.
Wow.
No, obviously 50.2%. So
it's the 40.8 and 50.2. It's almost 48-52, but not quite. Not that magic ratio.
Not that magic ratio. But this means you won't be wearing a tie then.
No,
forward, I guess.
which means
it's
that the fact that this has been brought through from the other room for me. I mean.
I think
here's the Twitter poll there. Yeah. That's a screenshot from a second ago, which means that it's shifted slightly more to the no camp since that was there. But there it is. The people have spoken. This will remain untied for today.
Well, you could always overturn the results, the democratic results of the.
There's a lot of precedent apparently for at least campaigns.
I did have actually a suggestion from one of our viewers.
Oh yeah.
Steve said earlier, my wife has suggested a compromise. Tom should just take his shirt off. So that's one That's one option.
I mean, I'm a little bit lost for words for that. Was that Steve's wife? Well,
yes, Steve's wife.
Steve's wife can email me, and we can sit this. It's fine. No, I think this is a family programme, and we're very much before the watershed. So I think we'll avoid any toplessness for now.
Yes, well, that is it from us here at To The Point. We'll be back tomorrow. You'll be back tomorrow as well, standing in for Patrick again. But don't go away, because up next is The Briefing with Esther McVeigh.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Well, looking ahead to today's weather. And the UK is looking showery. For many, with colder air working its way southwards across northern areas. Let's take a look at the details. Many of the showers should have eased from southwest England, but it will still be a cloudy and breezy picture, with rain not too far off the south coast. It's a similar story for London and the southeast, with a fair amount of dry, if not rather cloudy weather throughout Monday lunchtime. It will still be on the mild side though, while scattered showers will be affecting much of Wales, with brighter weather further north and cloudier skies in the south. Temperatures will be up to 11 degrees Celsius. It's brighter skies for much of the Midlands, though a few showers are likely towards Herefordshire and Shropshire. Temperatures at lunchtime up at 9 or 10 degrees Celsius for many areas, with a brisk southwesterly wind. Some sunshine for much of Yorkshire, but will run into thick cloud towards County Durham and Northumberland, with some patchy rain arriving on the scene by lunchtime. Temperatures by now back into single figures. A cold front bringing about chillier weather will be sat over central and southern Scotland at lunchtime, with temperatures continuing to fall through the afternoon. That same weather front will be making inroads into the north of Northern Ireland, but at this stage it should still be dry and perhaps quite bright for Belfast and Armagh. Rain and hill snow will be coming south into northern England this evening, becoming very windy with snow showers in northern Scotland. Expect a temperature drop throughout the day, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the